resources in that area.
Good, thanks.
Daniel, one thing that would be helpful is we're thinking about, maybe recruiting some college students who want to do some version of, Canvas or handing out materials and things like that. So if you've got any ideas about, how to connect further with people who just want to volunteer some time,
Right.
they could plug into our existing programs, as opposed to trying to design more outreach for us.
Right, so just, I see K through 12 outreach, I guess that's
Yeah,
in there.
there you go.
And I also think of an organization like Community Impact, which is just, as far as volunteers go, and if it's just, as far as getting the word out, I think that's an appropriate organization for an opportunity like that.
Great, thank you.
So are the folks that do the workshops and expanding your horizons to one for female scientists, are they all Cornell students who do the workshops?
So I don't believe so from what I looked at. I believe they bring some outside resources as well, from across New York State. I don't know the specific details, and this is actually coming up in April. I believe it's a little quick turnaround for this year.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking about next year.
Right. So one thing we can do is, that weekend, as far as maybe having people go and gather some information as far as, the scheduled activities and those sorts of things, I think is another way to, figure out.
Yeah, I mean,
what
I
was
would think
that.
it'd be interesting if there was some way that teachers and students could be involved in doing the workshop perhaps next year. Some of the older students.
Right. Absolutely. Part of the co-marketing, I think. Pitching, right?
Yeah. Well, also role modeling.
Right.
I think also for Let's Get Ready, the group, it seems like that might be a nice alignment with some projects for our graduating seniors, those who may be contemplating and thinking about applying to college and looking at what type of assistance and service that might be available.
And maybe that's even something the juniors this year.
Or rising.
Yeah,
or rising seniors.
Now.
Yeah.
So I think that's what I was mentioning earlier. There might be some tutoring, and some of these opportunities might be able to be quicker implemented, and some of the bigger projects, more strategic, might take some time and some thought around developing, that sort of outreach.
That's great.
So it sounds like since you have you have until May, that it would be appropriate to prioritize some of these and actually use some of the time that you have left to start making some contacts.
Absolutely. We'd love to do that. That was the idea, that we wouldn't really just stop at this. That would be the follow-through that we have from here.
Great. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Daniel.
Great. Next order of business is orientation to the accountability plan, progress report requirements for the second charter term.
I'm actually not leaving.
No. Ever, right?
Well,
Okay, that's not.
At least until they find flight 370.
so also Joe's staying after to meet with, to arrange times with staff associations and
So, it's actually great that we've got, teachers and staff here, because we are directly responsible for helping our students to meet the guidelines in our accountability plan. And for the second charter term, there are some new requirements for high schools across the board that I've been asked by the board to orient you all to. And you've got some materials in your packet that spell it all out in writing in the longer form, but I've got a spreadsheet to show you some of the differences between the old accountability plan and the new accountability plan. So, as requested by the board, I've been working to develop an accountability plan task force. I've been meeting with Joe to get up to speed with the work on establishing the accountability plan for our next charter term. So, Joe, before I do this, is there anything you want to say about this one?
Yes, actually, probably most of my presentation is really the following, or at your suggestion, suggestion, or with your knowledge, I contacted the, help me with this, the
Northeast.
let me start.
Right.
Northeast Charter School, I think of it as a network, you say association.
Association.
whatever. And in particular, Jill Sheehan, who's one of a very experienced person who's both consulted with a variety of schools, including charter schools, but also served with CSI, the SUNY our authorizing organization as well. And the short of what she counseled was that SUNY, as we know, or as we're about to learn, is upping the ante in terms of the performances that they expect out of each and every of its charter schools, the essence of which, as I understand it, is each of you charter schools that we authorize will be doing better than the equivalent school, local school. In other words, New Root, and as I understand it, again, subject to any corrections, is that New Roots will be doing better in virtually all the traditional academic measures than Ithaca High School, which is a tall order because it's a high-performing school with a different group of students there than we have here. I see our students facing a much wider variety and a deeper set of challenges, by and large, as a group, than the ones that Ithaca High, and I speak about the Ithaca High students with some knowledge. So that's one. The standards have been upped, and we have direct competition, and we have to do better than Ithaca High. So I guess our mission is beat Little Red, right?
Rather afraid of it.
Who's afraid of it? Is that what you said?
That's right, who's afraid?
So that's one. The second component that she suggested, actually there's two more. The second data component was a suggestion that we, with their help, identify areas of growth among our students that we could show, the theme of which would be the longer you're at New Roots, the longer you're in our program, the longer you're working with our teachers and our staff, the better you do. And so she was going to have some of her staff try and identify such growth measures that we could then begin to monitor, and we could then present the next time we seek renewal or certification. The last item that she mentioned is one that we just talked about very briefly, and that was that we must bring in new students. And she asked me essentially the following question: in what way is the board closely monitoring the efforts of the school and the school community to bring in new students? How often are you checking with those who have demonstrated some kind of interest in the school? Are you going back to them? But if they haven't enrolled now, do you go back again? And how else do you cultivate interest beyond what you're doing now? And again, how will you follow up once you get some initial spark of interest? Because she said what's real obvious: ain't no students, ain't no school.
Right.
So that's
Actually,
my
in
report.
response to that question, Rebecca and I started putting together, mapping out our marketing plan, and so that we can make a presentation to the board that answers that in full detail. Yes.
Pardon me, but what Jill was saying was that we, at the table, need to come up, as I understood it, with some simple structure so that we're looking over your shoulder basically and saying, wonderful plan, we love it, it's great, but how many have we contacted? How many have indicated interest? How many have we followed up with? How many ultimately are we bringing into the fold?
Got that too.
Was Ithaca High School the only comparison school, given the fact that we have students from a variety of different geographical locations and districts?
That's my understanding.
Mhm.
I think that's the way it's written, right?
Well, I think that one of the things that's interesting is that with this round, they back off the direct comparison with IHS on some of the measures,
Mhm.
but not all of them. So there's one, so I think I'll put this up here so we can just do a whirlwind tour of this. And that'll help us to figure that out. Katie, and now to,
There you go, you got it. High tech. You got it all.
yeah, I'm high
You're
tech.
high
I'm
tech.
high tech on the back.
Right.
This beast I am just. So, in terms of this piece, which everybody has in their packet, these are the full guidelines for creating an accountability plan using the current guidelines. And the summary chart for high schools is on page 7 and 8. And okay. Katie, can you help me size it up for this screen? It was perfect for Matt. Okay, so the first measure, the two measures that they're most interested in are English language, arts, and mathematics, and seeing both, yeah, if we could fit that all on one screen, it would be great. Yeah, that's fine enough. Okay. So, in our first charter term, I put here that the accountability cohort is the reference group. We've talked about the difference between accountability cohorts and total cohorts, with the total cohort being the total number of students who entered high school in a particular year who didn't exit the school for an acceptable reason. So an acceptable reason would be they transferred to another school, they moved out of state, they left and they continued their education elsewhere. If they leave and they drop out to get their GED, they stay in our total cohort. The accountability cohort, on the other hand, is the students in the total cohort who were enrolled between Beds Day, which is the first Wednesday in October, and June 30th. So it's a select group among the total cohort. So one of the things that's been an issue in terms of some apples and orange comparisons is comparing numbers that are based on the accountability cohort to the total cohort. So among the accountability cohort for that particular group of students, 75%, this is the first charter term, 75% score at least a 65 on the English Regents exam after 4 years. So most students take that at some point in their junior year. Actually, we had some very nice results mid-year with our juniors taking the English Regents this year. But they look at the performance of students by the end of their 4th year in the cohort. So a student could take that exam mid-year as a junior, at the end of the year as a junior, twice as a senior, and maybe even August as a senior, and it would still count, right, as long as they pass that exam. So the old measure, 75% score at least 65 on the English Regents exam after 4 years. Additionally, 75% of the students who were found to be not proficient in English language arts, according to their 8th grade test scores, will also score at a 65 or above after 4 years. Also, our performance index needs to meet the annual measurable objective. So what that means is it's essentially, to sum it up, the performance index is a number that they use by adding up how many students pass in each of the brackets, like passing between a 65 and a 65 and 8. They just changed the brackets, but in each of the brackets, passing, mastery, how many students in each bracket, they added up, they come up with a performance index index that is, across the state, the goal that you're aiming for. So the expectation in our first charter school is that we would meet that annual measurable objective. Additionally, in our plan, we had some required and optional measures. So the percentage passing will exceed the number of students passing from the Ithaca City School District, again, by the end of their fourth year in the cohort. That the percentage passing would exceed a measure that we called the composite district, which was a weighted percentage looking at the performance of students in each of the major school districts that we serve. What we found with the composite district is that the numbers were often within a few percentage points of the Ithaca City School District, so it wasn't really a measure that told us a lot of anything different than what we already knew. And then the percentage passing will exceed Nottingham High School. That was an optional measure, and Nottingham High School was a high school chosen because of similar demographic features in the first year. So we were trying to find, since, you know, as Joe pointed out, Ithaca City School District or Ithaca High School's demographics are different than ours. Is there a school that we can compare ourselves to that has similar demographics? And the answer was that Nottingham wasn't really a great fit for us either, although there are some interesting similarities. And then finally, another required measure was that we showed growth in literacy skills on a year-to-year basis among our students based on the Terra Nova assessments. So that was the first charter term. In the second charter term, we've got some new and potentially, we have a wonderful new challenge that we get to take on. So now 65% demonstrating college-ready proficiency on the Regents exam after 4 years. So the state has now defined a score of at least 75 on the English Regents exam as college-ready proficient. So now we have to show that 65% of our students are reaching that 75% or above. And thanks to our marvelous English teachers, we had some really very wonderful results in our January Regents, which we can share in more detail. But anyway, that's a real bright spot. Also, 65% of those students not proficient in 8th grade are required to meet that 75 grade or above on the English Regents exam. Again, the accountability performance level needs to meet the annual measurable objectives, and because the brackets are now higher, the number will be higher, right? So the expectation is we want to be in a higher bracket. And finally, that our accountability performance level exceeds that of the local district. So again, that is the Ithaca City School District. So when you look at this total score of our students, how they perform in the brackets, they would compare that to the performance of the Ithaca City School District. So those are the new required terms. So that's a pretty, with English and math, we're seeing some pretty big changes in the second charter term. Any questions about this so far? Okay. Good. So good. All right. So actually, this should say. I don't know. Something didn't save.
Does it make sense to
But-
focus on the new standards?
So essentially, this is pretty much the same as English. When I tried, I must not have saved it with the one I dragged onto the thumb drive. So coming back, this is actually pretty much the same for math. Again, a 65% proficiency at the college-ready standard, which is an 80 now for math. All right, it's an 80. It's an 80 for math, right? 65% of students not proficient in 8th grade also need to reach the 80 or above. Again, the accountability performance level meets the annual measurable objectives, and that is compared to that of the local district. So that's, and again, like we had all of these optional and unrequired measures, or some required measures here, like the growth in mathematics skills is measured by Terra Nova skills, not required in the new charter term. Yeah. Any questions about math? All right. Science and social studies. Let's see. All right. Well, this one's pretty simple. I mean, this is actually the same as it was. So this is 75% passing Regents exam after 4 years, and the percent passing Regents exams after 4 years is greater than that of the local district, and 65 remains the threshold for passing on those exams. So, so we actually, although it's a science and social studies, this is 3 exams. It's the global history, U.S. history, and the one exam that we administer to everybody is the living environment. So although we do give other math and science regions as well. All right. I don't see the rest of my gaps. Oh, there it is. Coming. Okay. Sorry about this, folks. We couldn't get the map to project. Okay, so just comparing first and second term, we're seeing some similar kinds of measures, but they're defined a little bit differently. So in the first charter term, 75% of students will pass their core subject courses and be promoted to the next grade was the standard. In the next charter term, they're now defining that as 5 credits each year. So there's this, which is actually, that's more cut and dry. I think that's better as far as measure goes. The second, 75% of students in the second year high school graduation cohort will score proficient on at least 3 different New York State Regents exams required for graduation by the end of their second year. That stays the same in this charter term. And so does the targets for graduation. 75% of students in the 4th year of high school graduation cohort and 95% of those in the 5th year graduation cohort will graduate from high school. So that's the same. What I didn't see in the guidance, which is surprising, so I think I need to revisit the guidance, was this comparison to the Ithaca City School District. That's got to be in there somewhere. I can't imagine that would be coming out. But it's, yeah, it's not summarized here. We also had, again, the composite district in Nottingham in our first charter term. How good. Finally, college prep measures. Sorry about this. Okay.
Did you have the second?
Yeah, well, let me just quickly go over what we had in the first charter term, and then I'll scroll over to this, because this is a more extensive list this time. So, the college preparation measures in the first term were average performance of students in 10th grade will perform above the state average on the PSAT tests for critical reading and mathematics, and that the average performance of students in the 12th grade would perform above the state level on the SAT or ACT test, and most of our students chose to take the SAT rather than the ACT. Also, 75% of our students would earn credit for at least 2 college courses before they graduated, and that 75% would be matriculated into a 2 or 4 year college. So these were required measures as well, and there's some parallels over on the other side, but I'm just going to move this over. Okay, so we've got the same measure here with the PSATs and also the SATs. So the expectation is that the average performance will be at or above the state average on those tests. Also, here's a new one that combines the new college and career ready standards for both the English language arts as well as mathematics, which is that the percent of graduating students reaching the aspirational performance measure currently defined as the percent of students in a cohort who graduate with a score of 80 or better on a math Regents and a 75 or better on the English Regents exam will exceed the statewide average. So that's one tied to the statewide average, so the students who do both, right? And so given that the state's defined 75 on the English exam and 80 on the math exam, it makes sense that we want to see as many students as possible achieve both of those benchmarks so that they have an optimal chance for success in college. Here's another one that's new. The percent of graduating, two A's, students will graduate with a Regents diploma with advanced designation exceeding that of a local district. So of course, I think pretty much every other charter high school is located in an urban center, and so we have a different local district we're comparing to here. So that's definitely a high bar. Also 75, this is similar to the, I actually like this one better than our last one of 2 passing credits for 2 college courses, because this gives us a little bit more flexibility. So 75% will demonstrate preparation for college by passing an AP exam or a college level examination program exam, or by passing a college level course. So that's something where in the past we've broken down in the accountability plan progress report how many students passed, even though they didn't do 2, they did pass at least 1 that had college credits, right? So now we don't have to worry about those distinctions. And then finally, 75% will matriculate into college during the year after graduation. So that's the other, that remains, essentially remains the same. That's actually different language and that they've added in the year after graduation as opposed to just that they will matriculate into college, period. But of course, in terms of our reporting, we've been reporting, I say trying in the respect that means of course we have to track and record the data for all of our students who are leaving and collect information about what they're doing post high school. All right, are there any questions?
So Tina, I'm just trying to catch up. My brain is just
It's a lot.
overloaded.
Right.
So this handout that we have is the accountability plan for the first term.
Yes,
We don't have anything in this packet that's the rough equivalent of this for the second term.
correct. That is,
That would be helpful. Because for me,
That's the project.
that is the project. That's the project of the task force, which Joe has generously agreed to lead. And as we work on putting these required measures into that form and consider whether there are any other measures that the board would like to, whether there are optional measures that the board would like to include, as well as Joe mentioned, some of those optional measures might be things that do speak to the growth of students over time when they are attending new routes for a longer versus a shorter period. So, that is one of the projects we'll be working on this spring, is to create that document.
In the new document, will we be looking at a school that is more comparable, if we can find one? Than Nottingham was and High?
What do you think?
I'm hoping. But I don't know what that school will be. And it would be helpful.
I think the answer to that is that if the board wants to do that, absolutely. We could put, it would be an optional measure, it's not
Right.
required that we do
Right.
it, but it would be something that we could hold ourselves accountable to, is finding that finding that institution and making those regular comparisons.
So, the second charter term requirement going forward will be that percent of graduating students will graduate with a Regents diploma with advanced designation exceeding that of the local district. That is a requirement to get renewed.
That is one of the requirements that SUNY, yes.
It's a requirement.
And it goes back to what you said.
Well, in the sense, I guess, having said what I said, it's I think clear from what I gleaned from this last go-round and what I heard again from Jill was that, you don't necessarily have to meet or exceed every one of these measures, but you better be approaching them all and exceeding some.
Right.
And that it's, again, as we heard the last go-round, it's a bit of a holistic, it's finally a kind of holistic assessment. So if we had and I think you already know this, if we had every other measure but that one, the school would almost undoubtedly be renewed again. So it's not miss one, miss all, but you've got to be good, and that's obviously one of the. The one other thing I would share with you is where it left me, my bias is as few measures, generally speaking, as possible. Because if I'm on the staff, I kind of want to have them somewhere in the back of my head at all times. It's not how I interact with kids on a minute-to-minute basis, but I still want to kind of know what I'm being measured, and my school is being measured to do. And if I have 150 measures, there's no way I'm going to have many of them in my head. The other thing is, so again, were it me or were you trying to guess what my recommendations to the team and ultimately the board might be, is maybe we should find some comparable high school where we can take some of these absolute measures and compare ourselves. And other than that, nothing more except some possible areas of growth. And it may be simply that what we're really looking at in quote growth is here's where we were after the first renewal in terms of our advanced designation graduates. Now here, 3 years out, 3 years further down the road, this is where we are. We've closed a gap that's difficult. Here's how we close the gap between us and IHS in the same measure.
So does the staff, and by that I include obviously the teachers, understand the increased stringency of these new standards? Has that been communicated to them?
This is the start. First, the board has to create the plan and adopt them, and then we'll talk about them.
Well, and it doesn't seem like there's a lot of room to, I mean, maybe I'm missing the creative space here. I don't see a lot of room to wiggle. I mean, those are the requirements. So what does it take to put it together in an accountability
I
plan?
think you have to see
Well,
maybe
you
how
plug
you're
the new
gonna get
numbers
there,
in.
right?
So
Yeah.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, does the staff understand that if we don't hit those numbers, the existence of the school is at risk? That we're now, I mean, as I see it, the new regime here is we're being asked to compete with the high school on these very traditional measures that in my judgment, the school was never established to do. The school was about being richer and more creative and more innovative and to help students who might not be able to compete with traditional measures to become better prepared for college. They're just asking us to be another Ithaca High School, but better. That's not really why I signed on, to be honest. I mean, I'm just gonna say what I'm thinking, because it's just not why I joined the board or got involved with co-founding the school.
I have a confession. When I talked to Jill, and talked to Tina, as the new guy, I kind of guessed that. In fact, it became pretty clear to me. What you described, New Roots, is what I understand New Roots was designed to do, and why all you folks pulled together, and probably why most of you who are on staff are on this staff as opposed to a more traditional place. So I said to Jill, my sense of things as the new guy is that this isn't what the school was created to do, to be a traditional high school subjected to pretty rigid traditional measures. And she said, well, be that as it may, one, this is where CESI is, and by the way, if you were ever thinking of defecting over to the State Department of Ed, where they allegedly have more flexible standards, they're moving in the same direction. So if you really have a sneaky plan of shifting over, by the time you get over there, they'll have adopted pretty much the same standards. So I think that's how in the conversation, Jill's comments evolved to, so let me help you guys figure out growth measures. And I think now that I've heard this presentation, I'm now thinking, yeah, growth measures within the context of these traditional measures.
The other question that I have is, and it's, it's an honest question, is that ultimately the board is responsible for adopting the accountability plan. So there are required measures. They're required, and measures are optional ones you can put in, but to what extent can the board engage in dialogue with the Charter Schools Institute about its required measures? I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm appreciating Joe's leadership in maybe helping find out. I think there's certainly, it would be productive to engage in some conversation about things like the advanced designation, for instance, especially in the second charter term. The students that we'll be looking at in terms of data on this measure and all the rest of them are currently in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So we need to have students who are graduating with diplomas with advanced designation. We need to be focusing on that from 9th grade when they walk in the door, right? We can't suddenly go back and backfill on advanced designation. So that one is not going to be one that that we're knocking it out of the park in this next charter term. And we don't even have an opportunity to do that. It's just not something that we focused on. And a piece of that is that our 4-year mathematics sequence is designed to move towards statistics and mathematical modeling as opposed to being a traditional sequence. And in order to get the advanced designation diploma, students have to pass three math regions. So that's algebra and geometry and algebra 2 trigonometry. And many of our students are coming in not ready to take algebra, and so already they're at least a year behind, and some of them take several years to pass that first algebra regions that's required for graduation. So that particular measure is, I'm glad to hear Joe say that, it doesn't have to be above board on all of them, but that particular one is maybe not is particularly not relevant in our second charter term.
Well, that's why it stuck out like a sore thumb and hit me right between the eyes with the metaphor. It makes my metaphor, so it was just like, that's not us.
So that's the argument that we have to begin to figure out how to articulate it in a way that audience, SUNY, CSI, can hear and ultimately make sense. And also it would be helpful as the teachers begin to understand sort of what this template looks like, because I'm guessing that they might have good ideas about how we kind of close the rhetorical gap between these are the absolute standards, but we're dealing with this group of kids and we have these goals in mind, and we figure out some way to show that we're doing what we said and you folks signed on to do.
Well, I just hope the teachers understand that they actually signed on for a job that means they have to do better than any of the high school teachers at Ithaca High School.
Well, I'll tell you what, our teachers really, like the 11th grade teachers were like.
By better, I mean in these traditional terms, because I'm not saying that they aren't
I know, but what I'm
in the
saying is,
fullest
I wish
sense
I
of
had the data from our midterm results when our students took the Regents exams in US history and English, because they knocked it out of the park. We had you know, I wish I had the percentages, and I'm sorry, I'll bring it to the next board meeting. But a high percentage of students who did reach that aspirational measure of 75 or above, and we had students that reached, many students reached 85 and above, which is the mastery level. So I think our teachers have embraced the challenge, and we have some signs of success. And we have students who are not ready to meet those aspirational measures, and we will have to look at, I think looking at the growth of those students over time is going to be critical.
We also have one other secret, and that is that some of the scoring of the Regents exams at midterm were one of the scorers in the English Language Arts was a longtime teacher at Ithaca High who told me over drinks that he was quite taken with the quality of the writing of the students here. And that's somebody who's has dealt for 25 years plus with the best of that Ithaca High has to offer. So congratulations to all of you who contributed to that, and it's basically probably all of you.
Well, I really may, and I may be overreacting, but I think there needs to be something in each agenda at each board meeting that addresses some part of the accountability plan and progress that we're making. I don't think we can afford to go 1 month without figuring out what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Absolutely.
I'd almost say right after we hear about how enrollment's going.
That's fine.
Yeah.
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 I think the urgency for enrollment is equivalent to
Yeah,
urgency
yeah.
as it relates to
These
this
are-
as well. I think that has to be the culture of the school. It's paramount that everyone understand what we need for student success, as well as what we need in terms of student enrollment as well. And it can't be, we come up with market plans and all of these different things, but, you know, it has to be boots on the ground for everyone.
Real live bodies.
Yeah, real life bodies in terms of what needs to be done here.
Absolutely.
On one other note, I don't know how many of you spend the money on the Ithaca Journal still at this point, but there was a wonderful article and picture in today's, I believe, of some of our students on what's the campaign?
Kick Butts campaign,
Nice.
right? So that was Kai, actually.
Smoking
Kai.
butts out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they participated in an event at GF, you know, took some leadership in planning and yeah, Kai, who's not here today because he has a practice, but Kai was on, was it the front page?
So that'll go on the appendix of our accountability.
Any other comments?
Just a note, I was informed by, I think of a college student who's working with the Red Cross Action Campaign, that they're gonna be doing some work with New Bruce as well.
Yes, indeed.
Okay.
Yeah, we continue to have so our team, our action team won the opportunity to go to Washington DC last year. They did in creating a Red Cross humanitarian law action campaign. Has landed in some international training. They did a really beautiful job, so now they're expanding that program. So now all of the Spanish classes are involved in this program, and they're actually doing their work in Spanish, which is something that's unique to our team compared to others. So I think that would be a great board presentation by students and the teacher that's coordinating it.
Yeah, I look forward to hearing about that.
And actually, on my blog, there's a blog entry about it. So if you want a teaser, that would be a place to look.
So did data task force data monitoring ideas already get wrapped into what we just talked about, or is that a new thing? That's all been wrapped together.
That was it.
Any other new business that we need to discuss right now? Okay, we've already taken care of our old business, so I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second by Roger Richardson. All those in favor, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. We are adjourning at 7:19.
Back up.